Noting the presence of the quorum, I would call the October 20th, 2011 meeting of the Telecommunications Board to order. I'd recognize Fritz Giesler for some agenda insertions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to pass out some material. One of these items is a printout of some of the proposed changes that Mr. Smith has presented for item number 8, discussion of amendments to Articles 6 and 7 of the Administrative Rules. And the other item that I have is a revision of the front page of where it's titled AT&T Uverse Agreement. There was one very minor revision on that. The word franchise between Uverse and agreement was deleted. So it says Uverse Agreement, not Uverse Franchise Agreement. But if you'll give me a moment, I'll give you these revised documents, or these documents, and here is the agenda. These things come in as they come in. I try to get them distributed to you via email. Sometimes they come in late, and so we'll have that. And here's the agenda. Yes, sir. Here's that. Also, one of the things that we like to do for members of our boards and commissions, and new members especially, is recognize their service. And I would like to do so tonight to Mr. Mitchell Spearman. Mr. Spearman, this certificate is for you, and thank you very much for being the newest member of the City of Fayetteville Telecommunications Board. Welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Spearman, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Mitchell Spearman, and I am a very new member. I got here just before summer started, and I work at the University of Arkansas. And I moved here from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a native of South Carolina, where I attended University of South Carolina School of Law. While there, I worked at the McNair Law Firm, which is a government relations and lobbying law firm, and we worked closely in hand with AT&T, and my area was telecom. And so I am a proud student of voice over internet protocol, and had to cut my teeth writing papers and getting told I didn't know enough to do. But I'm thrilled to be in Arkansas. There is something special in these hills. When I came here for the first time, I knew that I could live here forever. And so I'm just so thrilled to be in the 479, and honored to get to work with y'all. So glad to be here.
Thanks, welcome. With that said, we'll move into a roll call. Mr. Eric.
Here.
Mr. Pennington, I'm here. Mr. Shepard.
Here.
Mr. Smith. Here. Mr. Spencer.
Here.
And Mr. Spearman.
Here.
All right. Next item on the agenda is approval of the September meeting minutes. Hope all of you have had a chance to review those. Ask if there are any changes, additions, deletions, or motions.
Make a motion that we, or I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Motion by Mr. Shepard to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Herrig. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is approval of the October 20th, 2011 meeting agenda. I would note for the board that Mr. Hilton made a request that we include 2 items at the agenda. One is recent changes. I'm sorry. The request reads, please add an agenda item to discuss the potential impact on transparency and citizen participation in government due to the following. 1, recent changes in the government channel policy. 2, proposed changes in the Telecom Board ordinance. I would note for the board that the government channel policy was adopted in October of last year. And I would also note that the proposed changes in Telecom Board ordinance is already up for discussion. Are there any motions to?
Well, I would move that we add the first item, since we're already going to discuss the second item, to the agenda tonight.
Ms. Shepard has moved that we add item 1 to the agenda. Is there a second? Seeing no second, the motion fails. Any other motions or other business regarding the agenda? Any motions to approve the agenda as proposed?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as proposed.
Motion by Mr. Spencer.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Smith. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. The ayes have it. Note that there's no old business, so we'll move immediately into new business. First, we have the presentation of the AT&T UVerse agreement renewal. We have Mr. Williams, City Attorney, as well as Cathy Foraker representing AT&T. Recognize Mr. Williams.
I think Liz
Or
Reed also.
Miss Smith.
Yeah. I wanted to introduce them both, and I'm honored that they're here speaking with us, and I thank you for taking both the time out of your busy schedules to do so. As you know, the AT&T contract is a 5-year renewal, and we're up at the 5 years. I want to turn it over now for Kit Williams to discuss this. It's pretty straight up. I'm recommending, as does Mr. Williams, that we renew the existing contract, but there's some slight word changes, and I'll have Mr. Williams discuss that.
Let me, if I can, take you back very briefly to about 5 years ago when Cathy Foraker and AT&T Arkansas came to the city and said that they wanted to begin presenting UVerse, which is a internet protocol type service to the citizens. Not exactly cable. We already had a cable TV supplier, and there were specific federal rules and rights that the cities clearly had to regulate and to require franchise fees and public access stations from cable companies. AT&T and I discussed the situation. They're kind of a new breed, a new animal to some extent, and the federal government, the FCC, has left the law somewhat murky in this regard. And instead of attempting to just, well, let's see exactly what it is and we'll stake our side and they stake their side, we'll take it to court and figure it out, we decided instead that it would be better for our citizens if we basically treated AT&T approximately equally to Cox Cable, which is our current other regular cable TV network. And so we prepared a contract where the same franchise fee or the same fee that is being that Cox pays, AT&T will pay. They also agreed to carry our public, educational, and government channels, and to provide us the equipment to be able to do that, because we did not have the equipment at that point in time to be able to broadcast on the internet protocol type system as we did for the cable, the regular TV cable. And they agreed to pay for that and provide us the equipment, which they did. And we decided and basically to do most of what Cox does, although not in nearly as long a contract. It's like a 6-page contract, not a 30 or 40-page contract like we had with Cox. And we made it for a 5-year period, and that was about 5 years ago. Since then, I have not heard significant complaints. We've had discussions with them because you know, you always get some discussions and maybe potential minor disagreements with people using your right-of-ways and how they're going to service. But basically, I think everything has gone along pretty well. We've worked through any problems that we had with them. We still, at this point in time, don't have the actual service to our cable building, which we would like. There is a way for us to view, and Fritz can explain this better than I can. They provided us a way to view the signal as it goes out to AT&T, but we can't turn around and look at it like we're a subscriber and make sure the signal's coming through as well as we want to. So one thing that we asked for and that they agreed to do in this contract, beyond what they had already done, is provide free of charge one basic video service connection and one set-top box, enabling the city to receive AT&T UVerse TV service for the purpose of monitoring its PEG channel broadcasts at the city's cable administration building when such service becomes available to that location. We hope it'll be soon because obviously Southwestern Bell is right down the street, so we hope they can find a way to move up the street, move their cable up the street a little bit and get to us soon. But beyond that, I think that probably the original contract we had serves us well. This is still a murky area of the law, and we're trying to treat them the way we treat Cox, so it's a level playing field. And so that's our recommendation, that we we just include this one additional page, and as you see, AT&T has now agreed to that. The AT&T UVerse agreement, they didn't want franchise in there. That's another kind of bone of contention a little bit, and that's another one we said in our original agreement that if the law changes, we could either side could go back and revisit that if the federal government makes up their mind and does something different. But until then, we would not waste our money litigating against each other. We want to let the federal government make their final decision on how they're going to treat this new sort of service. I'm certainly willing to take any questions about that, and as I said, Cathy Foraker is here. She is the government relations officer for AT&T Arkansas, I think.
Director of External Affairs.
Okay, and she will come up and sit in the hot seat if you have any questions for her. I'm sure she'll be happy to do that. Or if she has anything she wants to say, too, in case I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add, Cathy?
Well, I was speaking with Lindsley, and a lot of you were not on this board when we first came to the city to enter into the first agreement, and so I wasn't sure how many of you were even familiar with the product. So I did bring some brochures that kind of outline it if anybody would like to see it. It shows the pricing, the channel lineup, those kinds of things. Kit explained it very, very well. It is not a cable product. Cable is defined as the one-way transmission of service. Because this is internet protocol, it is absolutely a two-way conversation. You tell the TV what you want to see and it's there, and the channels change like that. And I think if you could see the city franchise fees that we've been paying, when we first came to this board, it was sort of like we had this idea for a product, and now you see it out in the neighborhoods. The good news I have to share with you today is because probably the largest complaint I get is the people that can't get it at their home. And there is new technology that we'll be deploying next year. And when they look at a capital investment to determine where to deploy UVerse, they have to look at how many homes can they reach. In other words, if they're looking at this area or this area, the area with the largest number of houses wins every time. Well, when they set a box out there, it'll go 3,000 feet. The new technology doubles that. So very quickly next year, we'll be able to double the coverage that we're offering inside the city limits of Fayetteville right now.
Wow.
So, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, that was my question.
Oh,
How are
okay.
you doing on it?
Yes,
Because-
we continue to build out. It's never fast enough.
They've not reached my house yet either.
Maybe.
I have two questions of you, sir. Is what would be called a franchise fee if this was a franchise agreement, is it based on the number of subscribers in the same way with cable?
It's based basically on exactly the same things that Cox has to pay, and it's not based on the number of subscribers. It's a 5% of the bill, and the bill is for the same items that Cox would be paying the city.
Okay. Yeah, the other question is, what's the problem with calling this a franchise agreement?
I think you'd have to talk to their lawyer about that. He just thought that it would be impossible to say that, and our initial agreement said agreement. It didn't even say AT&T UVerse agreement. It said just agreement. You know, a rose is a rose no matter what you call it. We're going to get the fee. We're going to get our PEG access, and that kind of things, the things that are important to the city and the citizens. I would rather call it a franchise fee, but they don't want to.
Okay, well, whatever, as long as it works, but if somewhere in the ordinance refers to franchisee, would that be applicable to them or not?
I think it generally could be applicable to them. You might want to, in your ordinance, talk about IP-enabled services, because I think that certainly should come within your purview. They might not be the cable system as explained by the representative, but they certainly are supplying services very, very similar to what is supplied by a regular cable company, and maybe more.
Well, I commend you and the agreee for bringing us a clean document and for all your hard work.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
What was last year? What did the 5% fee turn out to be over the course of a year?
Maybe Cathy can respond. I can't. I'm not, the accounting people would know. So I don't know what part of the total amount of franchise fees it was, because we get franchise fees from many different sources. And AT&T also pays another franchise fee for their regular telephone service. So you know what the actual UVerse one was, Cathy, for the Fayetteville?
To answer your question, I do see those numbers, but I can't divulge those numbers because of competitive proprietary information. The city could provide that to you. I just cannot be the one to do that.
We will do that. We'll go ahead and provide that to you, because we can go back in and look at that.
I apologize that I can't.
Nope.
Last year, I don't have any numbers from last year. I can get them from the county.
Being a newcomer, do most municipalities treat AT&T in the same exact manner? Would this same agreement be found in Rogers or Bentonville or Little Rock? Is it pretty similar?
Can I address that?
Sure.
Okay. We don't have UVerse service all across the state.
I see.
We have it in central Arkansas and in northwest Arkansas at this point. What we did not do a statewide franchise because we felt like the current telecommunications law already gave us the right to provide the service. We did not want it to be detrimental to the cities if somebody switched from cable to our product. So we entered into individual agreements with each city where we offered the product, agreeing to match their franchise agreement. So you'll see the agreements up and down this corridor very different, where Fayetteville is at 5%, some are at 2%, but the basic wording of the agreement is the same.
And we also are the city that likes PEG channels, the public, educational, and governmental channels, and so we have that availability, and not every city wants that for some reason.
Active citizens, right? We have one.
Mr. Chairman, gentleman in the back.
I'm sorry.
Gentleman in the back.
Was there any public comment?
When you're ready for it.
Yeah, it would be appropriate for public comment.
Kit spoke of a free box that you get for monitoring. Does that go in your office, the mayor's office?
I don't have enough time to watch TV, so it's going to go to Fritz's office. He just sits and watches TV all day long, I think. Is that where it's going to go, Fritz?
Yes, sir. It'll go down at the television center.
Quality control is what we're talking about.
Yes.
And he can also, not the educational channel, he might want to monitor that too, and as well as both public access and governmental. And does educational channels that flow through our cable building also?
It doesn't go through our facility, but we are responsible for monitoring it for quality and programming situations.
And so this will help. This will help that also, that the monitoring of the education channel, which is done primarily by the high school now. Is that right?
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, you're welcome to stay with us, but you're also welcome to head on home.
Thank
I'm
you
going to
very
wait for the
much.
vote.
I'm sure you'd rather head home.
Yeah, we'll wait for the vote.
We're going to wait for the vote. We're not late until we.
All right. Does the board wish to take any action with respect to the AT&T UVerse agreement proposed by the city and AT&T? Mr. Smith?
Motion, I move we recommend to the city council that it be approved.
Second.
Mr. Smith approved and Mr. Shepherd seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Thank you very much, and I also want to thank you for your service on this committee. That's one way that Fayetteville is as nice a town as it is because citizens are willing to come out and volunteer and take their time and serve, and so I really appreciate your service.
Thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is presentation of public access services contract renewal. This will be done by Fritz Giesler and Shelley and Lindsley Smith. Whoever wants to take charge.
Okay. I'll start. Last year, the City of Fayetteville entered into a contract for services with Community Access Television, Inc., doing business as Your Media. And that agreement has stood well through 2011. The two organizations, I believe, is the city as the primary individual who is tasked with contract compliance and monitoring the provision of services. I want to tell this board that Your Media has done an excellent job. They've done an excellent job in meeting some very significantly changed contract provisions from what had been traditionally the contract for public access services. They've gone above and beyond in several ways and continue to do so. I want to also specifically thank Ann Shelley for creating such a positive and supportive working relationship with me. When we got together a couple of months ago to start talking about the contract for 2012, now this contract is renewed every year. We renegotiate it and renew it on a yearly basis. The services are provided under a request for proposal that is issued every 5 years. The request for proposal is not the contract, and the contract, as I said, is renewed every year. And when we sat down to talk about some of the things that we needed to examine, the first thing we did was pull out our notes, because one of the things that Ann and I have been doing all year long is we've been meeting once a week. And whenever we ran into something that might be an issue or might be something that we wanted to discuss at contract time, we'd make a note. And so we wouldn't have to try to remember it, over weeks and months. And we went through those notes and determined several things that we felt could enhance the services for the residents of Fayetteville for public access services, and also be advantageous for both the city and for Your Media as the public access operator. I'll give you a real quick synopsis of some of those and then answer some questions about them. I'll go into depth a little bit on some of those. There were some very minor changes. One of the things that we recognize is as you're aware, Your Media, as a public access operator, produces a program once a week called Short Takes, which is an open mic opportunity for residents to come to the studio. We have 2 opportunities every week where they can come to the studio, sit down, and for 5 minutes do whatever they want. Talk, sing, tell jokes, play music, whatever they want, and we put it on the public access channel. If the contract for 2011 said it would be a 1-hour program, we don't always have enough people to fill an hour. So we changed the language a little bit to essentially say it would be up to an hour-long program, okay? But it would be no less than 30 minutes. So just a small change to help enhance that program. Another small change that we did is in the, yes, sir?
Just had a question on that. Does that mean that if nobody, does that just mean the camera's on for 30 minutes? Or does that mean, if nobody comes, do they just have to show the empty chair for 30 minutes?
If nobody comes, we'll replay the previous week's program.
Okay.
No, we don't just show an empty chair. It's not a live program. It's taped and then edited together.
But what you're contemplating is at least for 30 minutes. If nobody comes in 30 minutes, you can go on and do something else.
Yes. We'll replay the.
That's
No.
the difference between taping
Yeah.
and telecasting. This was
Yeah.
talking about the telecasting. We tape twice a week for an hour each session.
No matter what.
Yeah, whoever shows up during that hour, we will tape for
Yeah.
up to 5 minutes. But we telecast a show made out of whoever shows up for an hour each week. So it's the difference between taping and telecasting. And because we've never.
Got it.
You got it? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure.
It doesn't change the same twice a week, 1 hour.
Right, the service is the same.
Service is the same.
Yeah. In the definitions, we ran into some confusion in the use of one word. That word it would be certified. In the definition of a certified producer, we just changed that word. It was used in the phrase, certified producers are allowed to utilize television center equipment as designated by their area of certification. We changed that last word to qualification. And it's just going to help prevent confusion. There was a clause in this year's contract regarding workshops. There is a requirement for the public access operator, your media, to conduct one free workshop a month on an in-depth subject that somehow is related to video production or telecasting or the use of those things in people's lives. In this year's contract, it was designated that the person leading that workshop would have to be a person from outside the organization. We agreed that there is a lot of depth on their board of directors of people that are professionals in the video production and broadcasting and video communications and other areas. They have a lot of depth of experience. They have a lot of expertise. And we wanted to allow them to be able to have the opportunity to lead a workshop. So we took out the clause that would have to be someone from outside the organization. And that just opens that up a little bit. One of the things that your media encountered in this year's contract, we set the requirements for the performance of how many certified producers are or how many candidate producers are taken through the education process at 50. We set that at 50. And help me get this right. It was 15, 10, 10, and 15.
10, 15, 15, 10.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
10 the first quarter, 15 the second quarter, 15 the third quarter, and 10 the fourth quarter. Going through this year, and as I said, this is one of those things that changed significantly from what had been done in previous years. So some of this stuff we were kind of going along and seeing what worked and what didn't. And one of the things that we anticipated was, because first quarter, last quarter, we anticipated holidays and other things, that there wouldn't be as much activity at the center. So we reduced the requirements in those quarters and raised them in the summertime and other times in the second and third quarter. That didn't prove to be the case. Actually got more usage in the first quarter than the second. Ann suggested that we even this out throughout the year, and we agreed to actually reduce the number of candidate producers required by 2 so we could make it even 12 per quarter in terms of that performance metric. We talked about that. There's not a huge number of changes. I will tell you that we're going to, now I'm going to talk about the one big change that your media board talked about, and then Ann and I, when we started exploring it, we realized that it had a lot of it touched on a lot of other things. So as we went through, we tried to make sure that we looked at all the consequences of this. Your media asked that the city take out the provisions for doing what we call contract productions, and that is where somebody could come to the television center and ask your media to provide production services for them for a fee. And it was a significant part of this year's contract. We wanted to make sure it was done fairly. We wanted to make sure it was done equitably. And so it was a lot of language in the contract regarding how that was managed. One of the results of removing that, which in the proposed contract that we distributed does not have that in there. One of the consequences of that was the elimination of any activity at the television center that would generate revenue for an outside organization, nonprofit or for-profit. Now in this year's contract we had stipulations in there that allowed up to 4 fundraising events to be utilized or to be conducted at the television center for nonprofit 501c3 organizations. Now, the very specific example of this, which we get to talk about tonight, and we have some gentlemen here that are, and some other folks here that are going to want to also address this. The Lions Club traditionally has conducted an auction of the air where they use the public access channel to hold a fundraising auction telecast. they have hired the staff of Your Media to produce that for them, to be the production staff and to do the work. If we take out the contract production part of the contract, and then Your Media is not available to provide those services anymore, and we take out the provisions in the contract for nonprofit organizations to hold those fundraisers, in other words, generate revenue utilizing the city's facility, then the Lions Club will no longer be able to have their auction. They will no longer be able to have their fundraiser. That is going to be a subject of discussion, and that's come up. My position is that I'm willing to, I see advantages to both sides. From a staff's perspective, one of the things that I would say is that we have a situation where we have traditionally done this. It's not necessarily a detrimental thing to allow nonprofit organizations. However, the flip side of that is there's a legal question as to how, even though we have done it in the past, how appropriate is it for any organization to utilize city facilities, taxpayer-supported facilities, to generate revenue? That's kind of the point of discussion, gentlemen. And so I'm going to present that to you as to how you might want to go forward in discussing that. I personally, like I said, from staff viewpoint, I can see it from both ways. And so, do we allow contract productions and other organizations to generate revenue utilizing the facility, or do we not? I feel like that's the crux of the question, and I want to allow Ann to now discuss that as well.
Just a couple of points of clarification. And again, I want to echo Fritz's comments on how great our working relationship is, that we're even here presenting a contract this early in the year and come to the table unified in doing so. With regard to the contract productions, the change that happened this year over 2010 was that contract productions could be performed using television center facilities and equipment, but they had to be at market value, so as not to be in competition with for-profit, privately owned corporations doing the same work. So while Your Media does production work outside of public access, we can't do contract productions using the television center facility and equipment. When that happened, we now charge $180 an hour at public access television, which is the market rate. Contract productions virtually ended. I mean, it seemed as if the market for people seeking Fayetteville public access television facilities and equipment for such contract productions did it because they got a discount, because it was less expensive. So that's why we see there's not really a need or demand for that happening over this past year. So to me, there's the contract production issue, and also, can people use the public access facility as a private organization to do fundraisers, etc.? I will say to you, the most important piece in this contract to me, besides our organization meeting the criteria that's written out on it, is that we provide these services on a fair and equal, non-discriminatory, first-come, first-served basis. And while I and Shelley personally love the Lions Club Telethon and support it wholeheartedly, when I put on my hat as the director of the organizations that's providing services, I have to say, is that really fair and equal access to everyone? And that's to me, the question before you. I'm really glad that with this issue, along with many issues we've talked about, Lindsley and Fritz over the last year or so of my tenure, is that we really are trying to live up to that bastion, that this is open to Fayetteville residents on a fair and equal, first-come, first-served, non-discriminatory, free basis. And we're getting closer and closer to that. And there have been several exceptions to that particular rule that we have had to deal with. And this is one of them. And my hope is that you'll have a rich and full discussion. I'm glad folks from the Lions Club are here, so that as we move forward, we're doing things that citizens have had a say in, because public access television is for everyone. That we're not just doing something because that's the way it's always been done. We're doing something that really meets that criteria. So that's my 2 cents to add for clarity.
I wanted to also clarify one more point on this year's contract in regard to this subject. In this year's contract, the only things that are allowed to generate revenue for an outside organization are the 4 allowed fundraisers for a nonprofit 501c3 organization. That, in terms of doing a video production, that is the only thing that the television center can be utilized for. So those are the only exceptions in this year's contract. How that might be, changed or adjusted, we'll discuss. But it was just limited to the 4 instances that could have occurred this year.
And one last point of clarification, because we are doing a Lions Club telethon this year in 2011 under the current contract, and this year they have increased the fee that they typically pay. They paid $1,000 to then CAT. Now any money that is gathered at Fayetteville Public Access Television goes into a trust fund to be used for Fayetteville Public Access. This year, assessing their needs and production time, they will be paying $1,620 for the same service because that is the market rate of what we will be doing for them there. So they are paying the current market rate according to the contract for contract productions. So it is happening this year, and I'll let them speak as to why they would like the tradition to continue.
Is that the only organization that's used the fundraising mechanism?
And in my tenure, yes. I know from when I started that there had been some events held at the television center to benefit CAT, the organization, the former name of it. But other than that, there have not been any other, that to my knowledge, in the last 2 years.
Has the city attorney weighed in on it?
I had just asked him, but then he just left. So, I was like, I don't think he wanted to get into it. He has reviewed it, and I think you had called him.
I called and talked to Ted.
And he didn't.
He remembered the changes in the contract and referred me to Lindsley, so.
Yeah.
My feeling is
Yeah.
he would be supportive of it because I know he just spoke of that before he left.
Because everybody supported the Lions Club.
Yeah.
Well,
The question would be whether it would be legal. Let me mention some history thing. It was probably about a year and a half ago. Catherine Sherrills gave, I thought, really great presentations before the RFP process and everything. And one of the things she pointed out that then CAT needed to look out for was doing things that went against, what was it called, unfair competition with private groups. And that what the city needed to do, rather than privilege people through taxpayer paid for equipment and a facility and all that, and competing with the taxpayer paid money items against small businesses that had the same services, that was unfair competition legally. She's an attorney, works in the journalism department of the university, had been involved with CAT for a while. So we had really thought, wow, that's a great point. So, and Fritz and I had talked about that for a long period of time, about what could or could not be done. I do want to point you have the contract in front of you, and just for verbal, what we're talking about on this prong, dealing with, I guess, what we could call the Lions Club provision, because when we started looking at that and reworking the contract, there were some prongs, I think, put in there, perhaps just to protect, because everybody loves the Lions Club show, and I love buying things on it. But it does get into murky legal questions. If you look on general provisions, sections 2, it should be your page 4. Under prong 4, where you have the wording, I think it's the second paragraph at the top, the city of Fayetteville provides the services. Do you see that paragraph? Described herein as a public service to the residents of Fayetteville for non-commercial use. The public access outsource provider will not allow any equipment, facilities or resources owned or controlled by the city to be used to generate revenue for any private company, group, organization, or individual. And then in the existing contract this year, it had exceptions in that. So this exception in the contract before you would cut that out, which was wording of the public access outsource provider may produce or allowed to be produced up to 4 televised fundraising programs or activities for Fayetteville-based 501c3 nonprofit organizations. But it kept in 2 of the exemptions from before, that the message boards would be allowed, of course, and the short text program, because that was so open that you could say things about fundraisers in a short take or in a message board. So we did feel that was important. I don't know, Fritz, if you want to mention anything on that, but we felt that was important and that was allowable and good. So just to give you that.
Are there any questions for the staff or your media? If not,
Mr. Chairman, one thing. When we talk about competing with a private organization, I know there are some production companies, I can't name them. I'm not sure how many there are in Northwest Arkansas now. None of them have a TV station. Is there a commercial television station that does this kind of thing?
All the commercial television stations provide production services for a fee.
They will. And broadcast the things in their regular lineup, or?
I wouldn't know about that, but I do know that they provide production services.
Right.
And we try to make a distinction between production and telecasting.
But in the past, one of the rules for producers was that you come down, you train to be a producer, but you must use everything you produce on the station.
That's still true.
Still is.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure we're competing with anybody else who's doing that, but if it's produced by a commercial station, you'd have to pay advertising label rates to have it broadcast, I would think.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah.
Move we recommend approval of the contract to the city council.
Is there a second? Just as a point of order for the board, once we have a second, we would move into discussion of the contract itself. So it doesn't bar further discussion.
A second.
Okay. A motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Spearman. We'll move into discussion of the proposed contract. If there's any further discussion by the board, if not, I would recognize the members of the Lions Club who are here to speak on it. Mr. Spearman?
Mr. Chairman, in the current form,
Yes,
4 fundraising opportunities.
correct.
What is the policy for that? If you had the Lions Club, the Rotarians, the Civitans, and the FFA, is it a form they fill out? Do they call you? What kind of process would one go through? Just briefly.
Okay,
come
I'll
up.
give the recent process with the Lions Club as an example. A call was made, we set a meeting, we met, we talked about their production needs, looked through the studio. J.R. Curtis, who had the production, assessed how much time that would take. We discussed the prices and then sent an invoice to the Lions Club, and we will provide the production and then they will pay for it. That becomes their program. Every program there, with the exception of the short takes, is owned by the people who produce it.
Mm-hmm.
So they then would have, the Lions Club representative would have to fill out a program request form, which anyone who wants something telecast on public access, and then we would telecast that program. Since it's a live program, that has to be filled out in advance, requesting a live program be fed through our telecasting system. And they have to get that to us in order to get it into the schedule for telecasting. So that's typically
And
how it
timeline for that? A month, 6 weeks, 2 days?
It depends on, for a live feed, we're asking that we've already we've had the initial meeting. They have a lot of work to do in there, and it's truly amazing what they pull off on the Lions Club. All that we provide is the staffing of the cameras, directing the show, and then the telecasting, live telecast services. So.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So if you do not provide the contract production services, they won't be able to have the fundraiser, or is it a separate issue whether or not to allow them to have the fundraiser?
Well, that's a very good question. There are 2 separate issues. One being that if we don't do it, a producer who's come and taken the classes and has been certified or qualified to use the studio production equipment, if you had a team of producers or qualified people, then they could do the show themselves, and that was presented as an option. then you're looking at, can they do fundraising on the air? So there are two different kinds.
Okay.
So yes, technically, we could get rid of the contract productions and still keep the fundraiser, but it would be the obligation of every nonprofit who wanted to do that to have their volunteers or staff members trained and staff the production itself. It certainly would require some work on our part, but that's what we're there to do. Help people produce their own shows and train them how to do so. So yes, there are two separate issues in the
Okay.
contract that affect the outcome.
I just wanted to make sure. And the second question that I have, is there a formal, is it a first come, first served basis? So if the Lions King asked to, the Lions Crew asked to do the show, would they be, could they ask to do all 4 of the fundraising? I mean,
I believe in the current contract, I'm not sure that it discerns
they-
whether, I think up to
That's-
4 different, it doesn't say.
Doesn't limit,
Yeah,
it could be the same one, I
So they could do all
guess.
4. That's part of the concern. But yes, you're right, that would be first come, first served. If they said, we want to do 4 this year.
so based on, I mean, is it as of January 1st, if I call and I want my nonprofit to have 4, then those would automatically?
If you scheduled them out and submitted your program request for them. And to be honest, my understanding is that operationally this has been a part of the contract forever. So it was a part of the contract again, certainly with the Lions Club in mind, because they have traditionally, in my understanding, been the only ones to consistently use this as an avenue to fundraise to this level. So I don't think it's ever been looked at before as, is this really fair and equal and legal? That's the question about fundraising. The production part, absolutely, anybody could do it if they come and take the classes and learn how to do it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in the case of your media fundraisers, such as we've had in other buildings, in the last year or two, ones I can remember, they were not broadcast live. In fact, some parts were not even recorded, I believe, in certain instances. I'm not sure that that's true. But how does your media itself raise funds?
Well, we do, for our
Involving the
organizations
station.
outside of the service we provide for public access television. As you'll see in my report, we just got a $7,500 grant. We do contract shoots for nonprofits and individuals at a reduced rate using our own equipment. We have a kids video camp that has a minimal fee. We fund ours through fee-for-service, donor contributions, and grant funding.
All of which are done outside the facilities, the Fayetteville Public Access Television facilities. That's work that your media does as an independent private organization. They don't utilize the facilities that the city provides for any of that other work, because as a private organization, they're certainly welcome to do that.
And when we submit anything to telecast that we've taped outside of that, of course we put it as a show on public access because we believe in public access and want to support it, but we then become an outside producer in that, if you want to talk about terms, in submitting any programs that we have a contract to shoot.
Mr. Smith?
So this year, the Lions Club auction on the air is going to be on there.
Correct.
And Lindsley's going to bid against John 3. How many hours and what time is this? Is it in the evening when facilities not otherwise open?
It crosses over into some time that we aren't open to the public. It's from 6:30 to 10:30 on December 8th and 9th, each night. They are determined about, in our time, set up about an additional hour, so we're looking at 9 hours of production costs.
Okay, would that then take away from your contractual obligation to serve the public, or is that counted as part of it?
It's during our operating hours, it's within the contract, and it doesn't take away from it doesn't take away from any classes. I mean, it was a good time in our schedule for classes weren't happening at that time.
So it just essentially takes your staff in the studio.
Staff in the city's equipment and facilities. And that is one of the main differences. I mean, your media, as an independent organization, we don't have a fully functioning studio. That is one of the draws to public access and the television center is that it has a studio.
like to give the Lions Club a chance to speak on this. If you would, please introduce yourself.
If you're ready, yes.
Absolutely.
Some faces I don't recognize. My name is Rick McKinney. I'm a lifelong resident here. That's why I know Kit. Call him by his first name probably too much. With me I have Miss Ruth Cahoon, who's lived here since 1965, and Mr. Tim Schatzman, who's lived here for about 5 years. We have a membership base of about 50 to 60 people that belong in the club. Routinely we meet Wednesdays at the Clarion. The club has existed since 1928, and we have been doing the auction of the air beginning on the radio since about the 1930s. Mr. John Rosso, who's been in the club since 1964, and a couple of guys that have been in the club that long, tell us that in the late 50s they started doing it with televised, and we've continued that each year through this current year. It is obviously something we really don't want to do 4 times a year, and basically that's because it's a lot of work, but it is a very good effort. The money that is raised from this effort, we get donations of products and services from about 175 local merchants. They donate their time and or their products to this cause. We raise money to benefit people who cannot afford eye exams or eyeglasses. And they have to send in an application to the Lion Club. They are reviewed. They are Fayetteville related people who either are residing in Fayetteville or are here on a temporary basis, perhaps homeless, and do not have the funds to be able to afford eye care or eyeglasses. If we get applications from people who live in other areas, we refer them to, say, the Bentonville Lions Club, Springville, Rogers. So we operate for Fayetteville and in that benefit. This is one of probably 5 fundraisers we do. It is our largest fundraiser. We do what is called White Cane, where we ask for donations out in front of a store like Walmart. We do a flag project, which the city participates in 10 federal holidays a year. Myself, Ms. Schatzman, Ms. Cahoon, and a handful of us go around and put American flags up to the tune of about 70 subscribers, including the city. It equals to about 200 flags that we put up every holiday. We also do, what am I forgetting, Ruth?
I just went blank.
Salt water at
Mike's Blues Barbecue, thank you. We just did that.
5K run.
The 5K run we do about every other year to help raise funds as well. All this goes towards eyesight. We also collect used glasses to take to facilities in Memphis and down outside of the Fort Worth area to be reworked into and put into a program that Lions International uses those also. And some of those come back to Fayetteville. But the money we raise here in Fayetteville is spent for people in Fayetteville. We really, would hate to see this go away. It would be a great detriment to our budget and operating. Our eyeglass budget is now at $10,000 a year. It used to be about $6,000. Within the last 3 years, we've had to increase that budget up to a level of $10,000 because of the demand on it. And we use this money to put specifically into eye exams and eyeglasses. We obviously start contracting with the department, way in advance, because we have to go out to the merchants 45 days to 60 days out to ask for these donations and their kindness of devoting that to the community. Our members are obviously volunteers. They're people from, like myself, who still work, to Miss Ruth and Mr. Tim, who are retired, but also volunteer in other areas. And so, you're talking about a network of people who are still working in the community and wanting to give their time, and many of those who are retired that have given for years, like Miss Ruth and Mr. Rosso, Frank Kerr, and I'm going blank, Truman Yancey, a number of people. My father was in the Lions for 45 years before he retired out, and I kind of came into his slot. So this is something we'd ask you to please consider. We desperately need that fundraiser every year to continue to raise funds to do our work towards eye care and eyeglasses for those who cannot afford it. And I would be glad to answer any kind of questions you might have.
Any questions from the board? Mr.
I
Eric?
have a question.
Yes, sir.
What percentage of the funds that you raise actually go towards the eyeglasses?
Well, 100% of the funds we raise, 100% in, 100% out. We obviously have dues structures that pays for our operation. That is on the operating side. Our special event funds stay in a separate account. They're not commingled, and we use that to obviously put into eye care.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McKinney, how much does it raise per year?
Between $6,000 to $8,000 on the average. It fluctuates depending on what is donated to us and what it sells for.
And are there other Lions Clubs across the country that use public access television to conduct similar fundraisers?
Not in our local area that I know of. I can't speak as to nationwide. There are many different types of fundraisers at different clubs. The Bentonville Club uses 2 fundraisers a year. They run a haunted house this time of year. It garnishes them an amount greater than we could raise in the auction of the air, but it's a totally different animal when you talk about having to organize and do that. I do not know of anybody else in the northern part of Arkansas that does community access type or government access TV for this type of purpose. But I can't speak out of total knowledge for that.
And that out of that six to 8,000, that goes directly towards the $10,000 that's part
Yes.
of the budget.
We obviously have to fund the other part of it with our other fundraisers.
So it's about 60 to 80% of your total budget spent
Yes,
on glasses per
that
year.
would be a fair statement.
Have y'all thought what you would do if this option was closed to you?
We haven't had time to think about it.
Okay.
When Tom Lonan went and talked to the staff about the contract, he called me immediately after the meeting telling me that this was a topic that we needed to talk about immediately, and obviously through email we put it out to the club, and Ms. Lindley's been very kind in helping me with the public information on the contract and the areas of change. And so we haven't even had time to think about what would he do. We would obviously have to come up with something else. We would have to do multiple 5K runs. We would have to try and come up with some type of other fundraiser to supplement that. You know, we do try to keep a reserve from past years that we've had a surplus in fundraising that has not gone on the special event side, but that again fluctuates, depends on the demand of the eye care and eyeglasses and what donations we get through those fundraisers throughout those years.
I have another question. Have there been any problems doing this with Lions Club? Have there been any problems, any complaints?
No. Actually, and I think Mr. Spencer made a good distinction there regarding the issues of contract productions and fundraising, utilizing the facility for generating revenue for private organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 separate issues. We did see this when we were talking about it and discussing it. We did see that as a consequence of eliminating contract productions. We talked about what effect that would have on the fundraisers, and then we started talking about the fundraisers and how do we make that fair and equitable across the board. There may be a way to make this more fair and equitable so we don't run into a situation where somebody calls and says, I want all 4, and it locks somebody else out. So, but to answer your question, we've not received any complaints regarding this fundraiser, and as far as I know, any other problems
No
associated
previous
with it.
problems?
No, sir.
This is obviously a charity. The Lions Club doesn't benefit from it monetarily or anything like this. So it would be a charity that the city provides to them. Basically, that would be it. Okay, that answers my question.
Okay.
Rick, you might tell them how much we raise in our other fundraising events as a comparison.
The flag project raises about $6,000 a year, $6,000 to $6,500. The Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue would netted about $1,200 for 2.5 days of hot, laborious work there, and you know it's good socializing. The 5K every other year, that has varied from about $500 to maybe $3,000 or $4,000, depending on sponsorships. That's one that's kind of hard to target sometimes because we've just done it about 5 times over the last 7 or 8 years. The White King, usually in collection there, is about $1,200 because we do that about twice a year. And have I forgotten any others? That's pretty much it. Some of the funds that we collect over and above what we do for this, we support the Lions Mid-South, which worked with the Hamilton Eye Clinic in Memphis and the ophthalmology school that's at the campus there. Those funds do not come out of what we do with this fundraiser. We use the monies from part of the flag project and the other fundraisers to support that a little bit every year. The disbursements there, of course, vary on what funds we raise. We send between $1,000 and $3,000 on an annual basis down there to help support that. We've had Matt Willis, a resident ophthalmologist, come up and join our club from the Memphis. He's up here in residency, I believe, in one of the Walmart stores, and he has been active in the club, so we get a little bit of return on that investment as well.
Lions World Services.
In the Lions World Services, yes.
For the blind.
For the blind, that's part of the Lions International, and we support that through our other fundraisers as well. Have I forgotten any of them? Okay. Now, I've only been in the club about 5 years, and these folks have got that more dedicated to memory than I do.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's somebody else in the public that has a comment on the legality or appropriateness of this, but if not, I would make a motion that we adjust the proposed language for next year to be sure that this kind of thing does occur again.
Is that a motion to amend?
To amend the, whatever, I don't have it for me, but the language that would reduce the likelihood of the Lions being able to do it in the future.
Which would be amending the contract production as well as allowing fund.
Would you amend it to the way that it was written before that provision was deleted?
I believe so.
To allow up to
I don't
4.
have the copy here.
Okay. Was it to allow 4 nonprofits up to 4?
Yeah. Essentially, what's being proposed here to you in this contract is to do a very clean, no contract shoots, non-commercial activity, essentially city buildings, city equipment, city materials, taxpayer paid for items not being used to financially benefit a private entity. The wording that is in the old one as well as the new one would still be public access outsource provider will not allow any equipment, facilities, or resources owned or controlled by the city to be used to generate revenue for any private company, group, organization, or individual. And then there were the exceptions. So whereas the exceptions for short takes and bulletin message boards being permitted, the wording that was taken out, I think the wording that Aubrey's looking at is probably the public access outsource provider may produce, it doesn't say shall, so there's still option that we're saying in the contract that they can always say we can't fit within 40 hours, or we can't do it, and it does say may produce or allow to be produced up to 4 televised fundraising programs or activities for Fayetteville-based 501c3 nonprofit organizations. Public access outsource provider may produce 1 televised fundraising program or activity for itself. This fundraiser will not count toward the 4 described above. Televised fundraising programs or activities may not exceed 24 hours of continuous programming, or if not continuous programming exceeds 7 contiguous days of duration. Fundraising messages may not be displayed over other programming without the express written consent of the program owner. So you have a lot of different legal questions in there too, because of the block of time, whether that affects the first come, first serve.
One of the original intents of limiting it to 4 was that there would be one per quarter, and we did not want fundraising. When we discussed this, when this contract was being developed, we did not want fundraising activities to overcome and overshadow independent producers programming that was being done. That has not been an issue. There has not been, the Lions Club is the only organization that's requested to have a fundraiser produced. And I would also say that from this standpoint, if we can develop some language, and this may be something that you're going to address, if we can develop some language that would allow, basically protect the idea of the first come, first served, non-discriminatory access, if the board feels that it would be appropriate to allow this type of activity, we'll see what we can do to develop that language.
I would say that that again is my number one concern, and if it is the board's desire to amend it, not being an attorney, one way that might address that is that may do fundraisers one per year for each 501c3 that approaches. So that not an up to 4 and not you can have all 4,
Yeah.
but that if it's a Fayetteville-based nonprofit organization, we can produce one fundraiser for you a year using the Fayetteville Television Center facilities. That would be one way to do it. That would meet the fair and equal, first come, first serve. And then that, of course, it would, the May language, I think, would need to stay because of other scheduling conflicts, et cetera. We have a similar approach to series programming. If a producer wants their program to be a series versus just here's the page, they have certain criteria they have to meet, and then it's scheduled on a first come, first served basis. So if the 1 o'clock slot on Monday, Wednesday, Friday is a series, then that person got it because they were the first one to ask and they met all the criteria. So it can be done, I think, on a first come, first serve. It's not written that way in the current contract. And that would be up again to the legal minds and whether the city itself wants to use city facilities and equipment in that way. And that's not my, that would be not my purview to comment on that. But I think on the first come, first serve, you could address it in that way.
Okay, I'm going to second Mr. Shepherd's motion so we can move into debate on that. My question is, Fayetteville Public Access that much different from AETN?
Yes.
Which broad is it?
It's vastly different.
Okay. It's not comparable at all?
No.
I mean, is AETN private or is it publicly funded?
AETN is publicly funded, but it is run by a private organization. It's a nonprofit organization, but it's a private organization. The Educational Television Network in the state of Arkansas is associated with Public Broadcasting System, and they do have a significant number of parameters, but they don't let just anybody come in and say, here's a program, please play this for me. Fayetteville Public Access Television, as long as your program doesn't violate there's only 4 things that it can't violate, and they're very simple: obscenity, copyright law, invasion of privacy, and commercial. As long as it's not one of those things, we'll play it. And AETN doesn't do that. They solicit programming. They pay for programming. We don't pay for programming. They control every aspect of their broadcasting and their programming. Okay. So that's a big difference.
They're not tied into a lot of the franchise, the public access federal rules as well of non-commercial. And
okay, I was trying to see if we could parallel that Jerry Lewis fundraiser with the Lions Club fundraiser. I didn't know if it was comparable at all.
Are you referring to the muscular dystrophy?
Yeah.
That's always been done over, actually that program has always been done over CBS. Has been
CBS?
Yeah.
I thought it was PBS.
No. Yeah.
It's been a national commercial network.
Okay.
But be that as it may, it still is.
All right. Mr. Harrison?
Mr. Chairman, it's my desire that we continue on as before and let them do their fundraising. I'm certain that not a person in Fayetteville would begrudge the time or the use of the equipment. for fine charity work such as this.
Mr. Smith?
Does this make it a public forum by opening it up? And if so, what's the rationale for limiting it only 4? I think the university tried to limit the number of times that a speaker could be on campus and found out that the 8th Circuit didn't think that was a very good idea.
I think as long as we find a way to provide language that continues to allow first come, first served, non-discriminatory access to the channel, that's our primary goal, always has been, and that's what we want to provide. I'm not saying that the 2011 contract's perfect. It's not. That's one of the reasons why we made some revisions to it. And this is one of those things that I think that Ann and I both identified as being problematic from a lot of different perspectives. And so that's why I think my perspective is that this conversation, this discussion is very valuable because of all of these points that are being brought up. This part of the contract, these clauses need to change, I believe. How they change is important in what direction we go, and it will. Do we limit it at all?
I think it's pretty solid legally that you as a board couldn't say, we will allow ones and the Lions Club of Fayetteville always gets it. I mean, right. I think we definitely couldn't do that. There are questions of, and then Don Mars here, too, of whether we have other examples to where city building or city facilities are used to raise money for private groups, or does that make us a partner? So like if Michael's saying the city needs to engage in charity work, then do we become a sponsor on that? I guess the other question would be, can we?
The city doesn't sponsor anything else that's broadcast on that channel. I mean, it wouldn't be an endorsement of anything.
Yeah, and it has to be an open mind to anyone. The problem you don't want to set up too for free speech purposes and everything too is if it's not the Lions Club and you're all passionate, about the eyeglasses and everything, that if there's another 501c3 that's selling a product that you don't approve of, then when the community calls to start shutting it down,
we can't say no.
We cannot say no. Because it has to be that first come, first serve, and you can just think about the probably worst product that you would imagine being sold on the air, and then imagine a 501c3 making probably a lot of money on it.
Stuff like that broadcast on your video.
So you have
on your video.
Actually, yeah, after midnight.
Public access channel, yeah.
But it would have to go that way because you couldn't privilege one entity.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Not to privilege one over another.
You couldn't sell obscene material.
No.
Well, what's obscene? It's a high bar.
Yeah.
That would be my only concern, is having had 17 eye operations, I am very thankful for good ophthalmologists on the East Coast, and I'm very thankful I have 20/20 vision. But it is, what happens if it's a group that comes in and wants to raise funds to, protest at soldiers' funerals across Arkansas because they're anti-American?
Fred Phillips has a 501c3, I think.
First of all, thankfully, this is me personally speaking, thankfully Fred Phelps is not a Fayetteville resident.
Yeah.
Coming back to my hat, we've never met before. I have very strong personal opinions and care passionately about many issues, but when I sit here and I work at the television center, all those go away. And I moved here from Kansas City around the time that the Ku Klux Klan and the ACLU were fighting for their right to maintain a show on public access television there. So it is free, equal, non-discriminatory, and everything needs to be held to that bastion. So we would be happy to meet with them and just shake his hand or her hand like I did Tom's and tell them all the options that they have and say, welcome to Fayetteville Public Access Television.
And Mr. Smith, I'm not sure we answered your question about the 4 or whether you can.
I don't think you can limit. I mean, constitutionally, I have a lot of problems with it. I think it's a wonderful idea, but I don't think constitutionally you can limit the number of people that can be on there. I also think that under Article 12, Section 5 of the Arkansas Constitution is clearly prohibited. And if we do go this way, we should probably request the Attorney General's opinion that it's legal to do that.
Can you clarify legal to do which part of it? The fundraising on the air?
To use city equipment
Okay.
funds to support any organization. I mean, you can't give money to labor unions or the Chamber of Commerce or the Boys and Girls Club or whatever, regardless of what wonderful purposes they might serve. It's prohibited.
In
by
contract,
Constitution.
yeah, we have to contract
You can contract for services,
for services.
but you can't just support their general operations.
Who can request an Attorney General's opinion?
Kit Williams.
Okay.
The thing is, it usually
It
they
wouldn't be quick.
tell me it's about a 3-month turnaround, and they'd probably like to be paid in January.
Well, no, I think if we go ahead and adopt it, you can go ahead and operate under it until you get the ruling and change it, if it's adverse.
I think this is an incredible issue to resolve. I think by all means necessary. And yes, we would like to continue to get paid for our services. But I don't see that as impeding that, if I'm hearing you
No, I
correctly.
mean, I think until somebody determines otherwise, you can go ahead and do it.
Well,
I have a question.
Fritz.
Do you, in this issue of the public forum and such, do you see it being an issue to limit fundraising activity at this television center to 501c3 organizations?
No, I mean, I think I'm president of Northwest Arkansas Labor Council, so
Right.
I said, I'd like to have a PayPal button on the city's webpage so people could donate to our charitable product. We have lots of, we give books to libraries, we give money to Meals on Wheels.
Right.
So they could just donate to the Labor Council if they put up a little deal on the city's webpage. I don't think it's legal.
We can't do that.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
legal, and I think this is essentially the same thing. I mean, I'm gonna vote for it. You know, the laws never stop me. I think it's problematic.
We have a motion to, I guess, ask the staff in your media to re-examine the contract and reinsert those provisions that would allow a nonprofit to continue to use public, or the services and equipment as before. Is that a good summary?
Yeah.
Awkward summary.
So to include the contract, the production, whether or not they can provide the contract production, right? Or whether they will be doing it.
I would say we'd have
Yeah.
to marry them. I mean, we had a recent meeting, not about a telethon or fundraiser, but about an event for League of Women Voters, and they didn't have the volunteer capacity to get trained, and we're looking for a way to, we first and foremost always try to find producers who are independent who want to do it, but I think you can't take away one without the other.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Mr. Smith?
Do we recommend this to the council, or do we send it back to staff?
I think you might not have a majority that want to add that back in. I think the motion on the table is whether you want to add that provision back into this or not.
Or not.
I think you have to vote on that, don't you? Oh,
And
okay.
then we would
And then we
vote
discuss it.
what to do with the proposal as a whole, the proposed contract as a whole.
And then go back to the original motion.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
I'd
So
like to- I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it would be appropriate to move to a vote on the motion to reinsert that language. Mr. Eric?
With an exception. I'd like to reinsert that at the discounted rates.
Now you're talking a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I think we've been there.
Just like it was before.
Before
We have
2010.
the chief of staff here.
Mr.
You
Moore?
might-
I was just going to tell you, in terms of your recommendation, because you're an advisory board, if you make an amendment to the contract, you would make the change, and then the staff would take forward the contract and either adopt your opinion in the staff memo as presented, or oppose your opinion, and the council would make the ultimate decision, just as is done in planning commission or any other advisory board to the city.
Okay.
So in terms
Thank
of your
you.
process.
So there is a motion to amend the amendment on the floor. Is there a second?
Can you restate the motion to amend the amendment?
The motion to amend the amendment would be to reinsert that provision at the discounted rates. I'm not sure what those discounted rates were.
Well,
That's a whole nother discussion. Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
That does open up a whole nother
Yeah.
basket of snakes, because now you're talking about a
Competition.
city facility being in direct competition with private enterprise, offering the exact same services at a discounted rate because they would be subsidized by taxpayer money. And in this year's contract, the language regarding contract productions done by your media was specific that they had to perform a rate survey of all the video production companies in a 100-mile radius, and we established an average rate, and we used that to assure that they were not being able to, that this facility was not being used to compete unfairly with.
I see.
Does that
I
help
understand that,
that?
yeah. I'll withdraw my request.
Okay. Motion to amend the amendment is withdrawn, and we're back to a vote on the motion to amend. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. We move back into discussion of the proposed contract as amended. Is there any further discussion from the board on that? Or from the public, or from the staff? Mr. Hilton?
Yeah, I have just a couple of questions. First of all, I noticed on the contract, apparently the amount of funding recommended is $93,000 for a year. And I was wondering, how many years has it been at $93,000? I think it must be getting close to a decade that it's been at $93,000. Does anybody know?
No, for how long?
No, my point
At
is,
least 5 years.
I'm sorry?
Probably at least.
Oh, it's more than
5 or
5
something.
years.
Right.
It's
no, I'm
probably
saying.
10 years.
Could be, but at least
And
5.
my point is, with inflation, and that being a measly number in the first place, that we need to consider about raising that amount. That is, if you consider inflation, it's really not very much. So that's one question I have. The other question is not exactly related to the contract, but I know sometimes I attempt to tune in to channel 218, the public access channel, and it's completely black.
Well, this would be more appropriate for probably the public access television report. I'd like to stay on topic with the contract itself right
Okay,
now.
well,
if you'd like to.
The 93,000, well, anyway.
Okay.
I would like to ask that question then.
Thank you.
Later on.
Mr. Bemis?
I want to put on another hat tonight, my cat, or I should say public access producer, but I would suggest a merit raise for public access. I want to give you the figures that I looked at for the money that's coming to the city. We had $940,000 come in from the AT&T and Cox contracts. Y'all were talking about that earlier. I got that from Mr. Becker earlier this year. $940,000. That was before they got their 5% increase. So far this year, they're tracking to have that plus the $940,000 plus another $30,000 or $40,000. So far in the first half, they had $377,000 for Cox, $116,000 for AT&T. Why not trying to peg your public access? So that's the wrong word. But the public access money to the amount of money that's a percentage of the amount of money that's coming in for the fees. They have certainly merited an increase this year. They've taken over a very messy process and done a beautiful job with it. Everybody in town has seen that. So give them a raise. It's been at least 6 or 7 years since public access got a raise. But this year, I think they deserve it. And certainly the figures coming in for that you view the public access have gone up. You're gonna have close to $1 million coming in this year for the fees from AT&T and Cox. And I think that is a significant amount of money that some of it could be redistributed for the public access. Thank you.
Staff have any comments on funding?
Funding's a decision directly of only one body, which would be the city council. From my understanding, they're streamline the budget, and I have not had any indication whatsoever that they would move from that. Plus, when you look at the money that's coming in, the money doesn't come in on franchise fees for a channel. It doesn't pay for a channel. You're talking about dirt. You're talking about wires under the ground. You're talking about easements. That's where a lot of that funding goes. They, under a 1970s essentially provision, the cities that want to have a channel can have them. But there's a lot more that goes into it.
Mr. Marr?
I was just going to say the city's in the process of doing the budget for 2012, just to, I guess, make sure that the Telecom Board is aware. Last year the budget was approved with a $1.5 million deficit, $1 million transfer for capital, and a $500,000 use of reserves to fund the budget that had a line item of $93,000 for public access services. We have had revenue growth in 2011, higher than projected, to the tune of about, we anticipate, through the first 7 months, if we extrapolate that growth rate, somewhere in the tune of about $900,000 in additional revenue, which still leaves us about a $600,000 deficit to current services versus revenue. Last year, the council cut funding to all nonprofit providers with the exception of 2. The public access contract at $93,000 and the library, Fayetteville Public Library, Boys and Girls Club, Senior Center, I don't remember all the others, but each took a percentage reduction. On other nonprofits where we have contract for services, they submit their prices and they may or may not get incorporated into the new budget. So this is basically initially started as a bid for services. It's just a negotiated contract. And I think that the last discussion we had at the council meeting, I think it was brought up about the number of franchise fees that are collected and a request that go towards a greater percentage towards the public access channel and towards paying this board. And it went down on an 8-0 vote at the city council discussion and the contract renewal last time. And I think part of that is just simply because of the budget condition that the city is in.
Mr. Smith?
Just a question. This is a 5-year contract the city has for this. Have there been any instances, either your time on the council or in the administration, that the city council has decided to raise the amount they're paying on a contract just because they thought someone was doing a good job?
I haven't seen that. If there are increases, they're typically either a part of the originally negotiated contract. Some contracts, for instance, on maintenance agreements for IT services will have an automatic bump up to it, but it's done at the initial time of the first year contract that applies to the 5-year period. Outside of that, I haven't seen it. But then again, a lot of our contracts also are rebid each time, and so we don't have that many contracts that are actually done with the exception of 2. We did have an increase, as I'm talking out loud and processing. The economic development contract this year had an increase in its renewal. That contract is not paid for out of the general fund budget, but out of the Wilson Springs Economic Development Fund, which has to have an appropriation tied to economic development that the council approves each year on its own. So that renewal did. Outside of that, that's the only one.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kiesler.
As a clarification, it's my understanding that the board wants to see the provisions for contract productions and fundraisers for nonprofit organizations as it stands for, in the contract for 2011, reinserted. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And my comment to that would be that we did have this conversation about there being only 4, or should we open it up to more than that? Or should we also try to say something like, do something to prevent it from somebody coming in and say, hey, I want all 4? That's my question. As I go forward, if the board says, please, does majority vote and say, please revisit this language.
I believe it was to reinsert the identical language from last time.
Okay. Any further, Ms. Smith?
I think if we do that, because we're taking the contract language out early on.
Now, they're saying reinsert that as well.
Oh, to
No.
put contract shoots and all
The
back in?
motion is to reinsert all of that language back in.
That goes back into public
Yes, ma'am.
access and all that.
Unamended as it is now, right?
I'm sorry?
It'll be as it is in the contract now.
Well, with respect to the nonprofit, yeah, the outside.
Yeah, the contract shoots and the 4 nonprofit fundraisers.
But we still have the point where we believe that the 4 needs to be changed to
That's
make
what
it
I
fair.
heard, but that wasn't part of the.
That wasn't part of the motion.
Mr. Hilton?
Yeah, I just want to make a short comment that according to the ordinance that established the Telecommunication Board, one of the duties of this board is to make a recommendation to the city council about the funding for public access.
Any other amendments or motions? If there are no further amendments, motions, or discussion, it would be appropriate to move into a vote on the proposed contract as amended. Would reinsert the language regarding those contract shoots with the 4 without any other particular limits. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it.
We thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr.
Thanks for
Smith?
coming by tonight.
Motion that we request or ask the city administration to request an attorney general's opinion on the constitutionality.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Spearman to request that the city administration request an attorney general's opinion on the legality of that.
Yeah, we'll word it mainly generating revenue for private entities in public facilities.
Okay. Any
What
debate?
the limits are.
It's Article 12,
Is that
Section
right?
5. Under Article 12, Section 5 of the state constitution.
Any discussion by the board? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it.
I'll see if they can do it. I doubt they can do a rush on something like this, but I'll see what we can do. Typically, it's about 3 months, so we'll get that written.